In the annals of history, few periods evoke the same level of dread and unease as the Spanish Inquisition. When you think of this dark chapter, images of intense interrogations, dramatic confessions, and the ominous knell of execution likely spring to mind. However, what if I told you that the true essence of the Inquisition's horror lay not in its grand spectacles, but in the quieter, more insidious aspects of everyday life? During that era, what if I suggested that the most terrifying moments weren't filled with shouts and screams, but with an eerie silence? The fear of being denounced was so pervasive that even casual acquaintanceship became fraught with peril. During the Spanish Inquisition, children turned against their parents, siblings against their siblings, and spouses against their spouses. The answer lies in the heart of the Spanish Inquisition itself. The promises of reward were simply too tempting. Blood, purity, a cornerstone of the Spanish Inquisition's social hierarchy, decreed that those with even the remotest Jewish or Muslim ancestry were considered tainted. Revealing too much about one's past, mentioning a foreign language, reciting a biblical passage in a different dialect, or even displaying certain customs or traditions could raise eyebrows and spark accusations of heresy. Therefore, families had to tread lightly, monitoring not only their words, but also their silence. This wasn't a matter of religious adherence. It was a question of lineage, each story more chilling than the last. Stories of fathers betraying sons, of sisters accusing brothers, all in the name of silencing suspected heresy. Firstly, we see how religion can be manipulated for temporal power. The Spanish Inquisition wasn't just about faith, it was about control. It can be a tool of oppression, a weapon of control, and a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. If you've enjoyed this episode, do you forget to join us next time as we continue to explore the darker aspects of history through the lens of tranquility. Until then, remember, sometimes the quietest moments are the loudest of them all. Those empowered weaponize religion to maintain and expand their authority. Secondly, we witness the corrosive effect of suspicion. The constant fear of accusation, eroded trust, and fractured families and communities. Finally, we're confronted with the lasting impact of historical events. The Spanish Inquisition's legacy of suspicion and mistrust echoes through history, reminding us of the importance of understanding our past to build a better future. And the obsession with blood purity led to a situation where families were judged, not for their actions, but for the heritage they couldn't control. On the surface, they were model conversos, a family of Christian converts descended from Jews who had successfully integrated into Spanish society. But beneath the surface, whispers of heresy began to emerge. The catalyst, an anonymous letter accusing them of grave sins. The letter spoke of secret gatherings where Bible readings were held in Hebrew, of rituals performed in the dead of night. It painted a picture of a family betraying their faith and practicing forbidden religions. What followed was a systematic dismantling of the Lemos family. Their house was searched, their possessions confiscated, and their children separated from them. Accusations grew, leading to imprisonment, torture, and ultimately execution. This created an environment where silence wasn't just golden, it was essential to survive. Family members hid their heritage, altered their names, and erased any trace of their ancestral roots. In a society gripped by fear and uncertainty, one person's heresy was another person's opportunity. Accusations of heresy carried substantial rewards. Witnesses and accusers often received financial compensation, land grants, or even noble titles for delivering a heretic to the authorities. It was the rule. In fact, these cases of familial betrayal make up the majority of records from the Spanish Inquisition. By examining these accounts, we can get a clear picture of how the inquisitors operated. This perverse incentive turned the fabric of society into a minefield of deceit, where every smile could be the last, every handshake the final one, and every word could seal one's fate. All it took was a whisper, a rumor, or a piece of misinterpreted evidence. The impact of such denouncements was devastating. Families were torn apart, their histories of love and loyalty severed by the cold logic of suspicion. Sons and daughters who had been raised with the values of faith and family found themselves dragged before tribunals, forced to confront the very core of their upbringing. Husbands and wives who had shared years of devotion suddenly found themselves facing execution based on accusations from their own partners. People stopped sharing meals, stopped engaging in open discussions, and stopped participating in community events for fear of being overheard or misinterpreted. This wasn't just about avoiding accusations. It was about to befriend someone during this time meant taking a risk, trusting that they wouldn't betray you in a moment of panic or suspicion. Silence became the new currency of relationships, a means to protect oneself while inadvertently fostering an atmosphere of mistrust and isolation. Welcome back to CalmCreepy History. Tonight, we peel back the layers of a seemingly paradoxical era, exploring how silence played a pivotal role in amplifying the fear and torment during the Spanish Inquisition. Unlike other forms of persecution, the true horror of the Spanish Inquisition lay in its ability to turn neighbors against one another, family members against one another, and even friends against one another. As we discuss this unsettling aspect of history, keep in mind the silence wasn't merely the absence of sound. It was a palpable entity that dictated how people behaved, what they said, and crucially, what they didn't say. Our journey begins in the heart of Spain during the late 15th century. This was a time when Spain, recently unified under the Catholic monarchs, Ferdinand and Isabella, was undergoing a significant transformation. The fervor of religion ran high, and the desire to purge Spain of non-Catholic influences reached fever pitch. The Inquisition, initially established to reinforce religious orthodoxy, soon became a tool for social control, economic gain, and plain old-fashioned fear-mongering. The Spanish Inquisition was a deeply insidious period marked by an omnipresent atmosphere of fear and suspicion. Imagine living in a world where a friendly chat over the fence could lead to accusations of heresy and have your neighbor hauled away in the dead of night. Such was the climate created by the Spanish Inquisition. Neighbors turned into secret agents of the crown, reporting every unusual practice or out-of-the-ordinary behavior to the authorities. Even the smallest deviation from the expected could raise suspicions of heretical leanings, a refusal to participate in religious processions, an unorthodox interpretation of scripture. Even the privacy of one's personal prayer practices became fodder for suspicion. As a result, people were constantly looking over their shoulders, wondering who among them was harboring heretical thoughts, or worse, who was reporting them. Friendships and social bonds were also irrevocably altered during the Spanish Inquisition. Family ties, the strongest bonds of all, were not exempt from the destructive effects of suspicion and silence either. But why did this happen? Why were families willing to destroy each other for the sake of mere suspicion? Another compelling reason for these heartbreaking betrayals was the concept of blood purity. However, it wasn't only about actively concealing one's heritage. It was also about what one didn't say. Perhaps the most disturbing aspect of this is that this wasn't just confined to a handful of cases. Consider, for instance, the case of the Limos family. The Limos case isn't unique. It is a microcosm of thousands of similar stories that played out across Spain during the 15th and 16th centuries. So what can we learn from this dark chapter of history? How can we understand the silence that defined the Spanish Inquisition? As we come to the end of our journey through the silence of the Spanish Inquisition, I hope you've gained a deeper understanding of how quietude can be more than just the absence of sound.